Good afternoon. Good afternoon to you all, depending on where you're joining. Good afternoon, morning. Today we want to welcome you to the Wiki Women's Capacity Building Workshop. And every month or bi-weekly, we host community members from all over the world to talk about their experience regarding Wikipedia editing, women's biography specifically. Today, we are very honored to have our guest trainer in the person of Jeromi, who will be taking us through some tips and tricks on how he does his work better. And yeah, I'll let him introduce himself, and then also he will tell us what we should be expecting in today's session. The floor is yours, Jeremy. We are very excited and honored to have you.
Okay, thank you, Ruby. Can I share my screen now?
Yes, let me make you a co-host. Yes, please. You should be able to share your screen.
Is it visible now? I'm
Yes.
sorry. Okay. So, good afternoon, night, or evening, wherever you are. It is currently night, 11 p.m. here. I'd like to,
Yes, we
first
can
of
hear
all,
you.
yes,
Um,
yes. Okay. So I'd like to give my warmest appreciation to Jemima, who has invited me for this session. And I would like to bring today's topic about writing woman figures and using non-English source. Why I like to bring this topic? Because I've been writing about woman figures for the past 5 or 6 years, and I like to share more about how I, as a man, am writing is about this topic. So yes, a bit of an introduction about myself. So this is me. This is me in Wikimania 2023. I'm currently I'm sorry, can I mute you, Ruby? I think your voice is yeah. Okay. So I'm an extended confirmed editor at the English Wikipedia for about 7 years. I've also been working in some projects, mostly in military history, in Indonesian biographies, but the sector that I'm mostly focused on now is Women in Red. So I've been creating more than 400 articles, and most of them are women. And I'm currently focusing myself on articles about women academics, especially in Indonesia, though the current political crisis has shifted my focus a bit on the current issues, and I've been making some of the articles. So I'm also a photographer, and I've been documenting some photos of current incidents. For example, the recent protests in Indonesia I've been documenting also, and I've also attended some conferences, both local and international, with the assistance of scholarship from both the Wikimedia Indonesia and the Wikimedia Foundation. So I think I've said this before. The disclaimer is that I'm a man and I'm currently covering topics about women articles, etc. So feel free to correct me, especially for women, because what I might say here is probably sometimes being perceived as man-centric, etc. So without further ado, I'd like to continue to the first topic and about a bit of an overview about what's Indonesia for those of you who don't know what's Indonesia. So what the media is saying is about Indonesia is that we're the biggest invisible thing, because when I was in the elementary school, what I was taught about was we're a strategically located country between two continents and two oceans. Yet when I go abroad and when I go to countries, some people don't know Indonesia. Most of people only know about Bali, which is the tourist hotspot in Indonesia, and we're most famously known by the abroad media as being always at a crossroads. I don't know, probably in a crossroad where we aren't expect to be growing and we aren't getting expected to being destroyed soon. And we're also a country home to thousands of ethnics and languages. So, for example, here in Jakarta, the capital, the indigenous people, the Betawi people, they aren't the dominant ethnic anymore, and we are dominated by the Javanese people, which are the ethnic that dominated mostly on this island. So a bit next. So this is the current issues that are affecting women in Indonesia. So the most recent issues are regarding the protests. So recently, the parliament has just passed allowing the military and to held more positions in the government because this was in contradiction to the current situation because like 20 years ago, the government has committed not to involve military more deeply in the government. And there currently is a large protest in the capital engulfing the government, causing major uprising among the students and the working people. And why is this concerning for women is the fact that our apparatus has been known to be not too friendly with women, and there has been a lot of cases of femicides involving the police, such the most famous one I think is from 1993 when a woman laborer was found dead in his in her house or in the forest, I forgot. But the point is that the common myth among the people is that the woman was murdered by the either the police or the military, and the culprit to this day hasn't been found yet. And aside from this, aside from the current protest, there also has been perennial issues such as how women are being treated unfairly in the workplace, are being paid lower than the male counterpart, and the lack of women involvement in politics. So I'd like to next talk about our main topic. Is it about writing biographies on Indonesian women? So as I've mentioned before, the Indonesian women are in an unadvantaged position. As you can see here, the representation of Indonesian women in academia, even though the percentage of lecturers, professors are 44%, but the problem is those who reach the highest academic rank here, which is the full professor, is about 19%. So this is the case nationwide, but in my university, I'll explain later why I brought this number. It is about 43%. And it is much worse in the politics. So for example, in the current parliament of Indonesia, we've reached an all-time high representation of women at 22%. But the problem is in the outside regions, in the provinces, in the regencies, we only have like 9% of representation, and it gets worse the deeper you go. Like in village, we only have 5%, meaning that our the entrenched patriarchy of Indonesian male hasn't gone yet, and it still needs to be fixed. And worse, the representation of women in the military is less than 2%, meaning that women are very unadvantaged when it comes to decision making in this country. And the reason why I brought this number is because uh, Indone- the coverage of these subjects needs to be increased because the woman itself has already been underrepresented in the community. So this is my main concern is the main question about uh, underrepresentation in this topic is whether it is a reflection of reality or is it the contributors of the Wikipedia themselves that are too unwilling to cover it. So I think it's either the structural factors, as I've mentioned before, the lack of women representation in real life, and both the lack of interest in contributors for Indonesian biographies. So if the number of women that are notable enough, because we need some notability threshold for biographies in Wikipedia is already small, then the the number of contributors who want to make articles about this is getting smaller, and this is the problem with the biographies. So I've done a bit of a research on this topic, and what I found is that the amount of biographies in Indonesian Wikipedia in biographies on Indonesian people in Wikipedia is much lower than its percentage. So for example, here the military is 2%. In Wikipedia, it is probably lower, only 0.7% or 1%. So it is a bit concerning. But the advantage here is the fact that we have a lot of biographies covering specifically for women. So, for example, I have this biography that I bought with assistant from the Indonesian Wikipedia grant, which is this title is the Sri Kandi. Sri Kandi is the term used for warrior women, and the subtitle here is a number of women in Indonesia, a number of narrated women in Indonesia. So biographies like this are very common in Indonesia, and it makes covering biographies of women much easier. So this is an example of a good Indonesian woman biography in the English Wikipedia. So as you can see here, this already has been given the good article title, and some of this have been created in 10 years ago, but the contents are relevant. There have been a bit of changes, but so far, no major changes. This is quite interesting because the subject here is the first woman in Indonesia to receive a law degree, as well as the first woman to become a cabinet member. So, like any other biographies, the article here consists of early life and activism, political career, and her legacy. And what I see from this article is the fact that the sources are mostly written from a male perspective. The authors are mostly male, and this is what causes what I mentioned here, the problem of patriarchy in Indonesia, where everything is reflected from the male perspective. So I'd like to go to the next part, which is the hard part in creating this biography, although it's either hard or easy depending on your perspective. So using non-English source for non-English biographies. So why do we use non-English sources for non-English biographies? The first advantage is the fact that when a people from another country covers a subject that he or she is not familiar with, there are certainly some biases that may occur. So, for example, if I'm an Indonesian covering a subject about America, so there's a lot of intricacies in the culture of the United States that I might not understand. And as an example, I projected my bias towards the article that I made. And so this is problematic because it didn't capture the dynamics better. So by using non-English source, we also can capture the dynamics of the person that we try to cover. And the third one, this is the most important because in my personal experience, I've experienced a lot of article deletion because of this, is that by using non-English sources, when we make articles based on this, we could avoid plagiarism issues. So we don't need to get concerned about the word being the same as the source, but we can just translate it and it won't be counted as plagiarism. And the only thing we need to ensure is the correct grammar and the correct wording. And the fourth one is because the source is produced by the people who experience itself, the content in the source is more comprehensive and contains a lot of more information. So for example, in my experience, if I use English source in covering, say, women politicians, the problem with the English source is that they tend to exclude informations that they do not consider important. But in reality, when we are writing biography, those excluded informations are sometimes very important. And if I compare it to similar sources that are in Indonesian, these informations are there. And so by comparing these two, I could see that there are some excluded informations there. So these are some tips and tricks whenever I translate, whenever I'm using non-English sources for articles about Indonesian women. So the first of all is that Indonesia is not a single uh, country with a single language, but there are a lot of languages here, and sometimes these non-Indonesian language sources that are in indigenous languages, for example, like Javanese language, Sundanese language, are also important. So if I do not understand what these sources are trying to say, I usually use Google Translate or ChatGPT. But I limited it for translation and interpretation purposes only because using this for creating the article itself is problematic because of the copyright concerns, because of the synthesis concerns. Sometimes this AI might experience what we call hallucination, what we call uh, deviating from the source, and this may cause problems in the future if our article got caught by the admins who do a patrol on this articles. So yes, that's why we need to use it if we don't understand. But if you understand, it's better if you translate it directly based on your understanding of the words. So secondly, when writing this kind of biographies, you have to classify the type of biographies because there are short biographies, biographies that only include important informations about the person that you're trying to write, or longer biographies where it is more comprehensive and more uh, complete than its short biographies. So if you're writing short biographies, I think it is better to use the English sources because sometimes the English sources have already compacted the relevant information. And so the only thing you need with the non-English sources is that you only need to cross-check the sources with the English sources to see if there is any contradicting information and write down what you think is correct to your judgment. And for the longer biographies, you might want to use the non-English sources as your primary sources because they are more complete and they catch the intricacies of the subject's life and their career better. And the thing that I generally advise to avoid is to do not translate word by word. As mentioned by the first point, it is better if we try to understand what the subject is trying to say. So the spirit of the words in the sources instead of the letter of the word in the biography, in the sources. So this is better because we could basically like, if we see a paragraph in the original source, we can just write the main gist of this paragraph and then try to enter it into the article based on our interpretation. So the last part is this is my habit whenever I wrote down biographies is that I usually include both the translation and the original word. So if I'm writing in Indonesia, what we call the elementary school, sometimes it is called the sekolah rakyat or literally the people's school, or the common term here is sekolah dasar, which is the basic school. So I include both this sekolah dasar and its English translation elementary school to allow readers to understand the literal meaning of this term and their English counterpart. So for example, sometimes there are concepts in Indonesians that are foreign to those who use English. So uh, for example, as I've mentioned before, the concept of full professors, it is sometimes unheard of in Western speaking nations because usually academic ranks are based on terms such as chairs, chair of what department, deans, etc. And so I try to explain this concept beforehand before I try to translate it literally into English. So we allow readers outside of our country to understand better about this term. So this is an example that an article that I've made before. So this is about Rukmini. She's the first Indonesian woman who reached the rank of general in our Air Force. And as you can see here, the main source that I used to make this article are in the form of CV. And there are a lot of abbreviations that are used in this source. So if I want to make it into an article, I have to understand what these abbreviations stand for. So there's, if you can see in the third part here, if you can read the riwayat pendidikan part in the orange, there are abbreviations such as SMP, which means junior high school, SMA, which means high school, and there are universities that are abbreviated. So I usually try not to abbreviate this in my articles. As you can see here, I translated as junior high school in Bandung from 1960 until 1970. This is because if I abbreviate it in the article, then people might not understand it. And people must have extra effort to search what this really means. So by making it longer, people can understand the meaning of the terms in the article. And there are, if you can see in the original source, in the second to last part, there are pengalaman kerja, which literally means the career of the woman general. And there are also abbreviations here, and that if we elongated it and we translated it, it would also not make sense since these terms are not in the Western speaking or even in the Asian or African countries. So what I try to do is to interpret what does this post do? What does this office do in this capacity? So for example, uh, this is the office is about data management, but the title is very long, so long that I myself are bored to read it. So I just write head of data management, even though the original office is very much longer than that. And so these kind of interpretations must be used to provide convenience to the readers. So this is my case study. So for the last 5 or 6 months, I've been focusing on writing about women scholars in my university, the University of Indonesia. And so a bit overview of women in the university is that universities in state universities in Indonesia tend to have a very high degree of autonomy. So as I've mentioned, even though Indonesia has a culture of patriarchy, the universities in Indonesia are very much different. We have strict rules about anti-discrimination. We have strict rules about gender equality and representation. And this what makes, as I've mentioned before in the statistics, our university has a very high representation of women full professors, and the number of lecturers in my university, the number of women lecturers actually outnumber the man lecturers. So that's what makes the autonomy interesting. And there was a point in the university history where almost all deans are women. So it was around, if I remember correctly, it was about 1978 where there was aid from the United States. And one of the terms that the United States makes is to increase women representation. And by that point, uh, our government, which was under the dictatorial regime of President Suharto, actually established a ministerial post to accommodate women, which is the name Minister for Women Empowerment. And University of Indonesia even took it one step further by appointing female deans to the position. As far as I remember, it was 7 out of 9, with the remaining faculty to not have any women dean are the medicine and the engineering faculty, which has been always traditionally dominated by men. And so why did I choose this subject? Because it is clear that by being a student in the university, I am able to access the sources about these biographies even better. And by writing biographies about this topic, I could increase my participation in Women in Red and ensure to increase the coverage of women in STEM and related fields. And for myself, I think I am able to understand what the women scholars are working on. So, for example, I've been recently working to finish a series of the deans of the psychology faculty at the University of Indonesia. And by working on this, I understand that psychology itself has different specializations, and psychology is not a single unified field. So by I could sometimes I try to interpret their research results and I try to include it in the article. So for example, uh, my habit of covering academics, both women and men, is to include their doctoral thesis in the article. So I usually include the title, the their advisors, and sometimes the topic that are discussed in the thesis. And by trying to understand the contents of this thesis, I also learned their discipline. I also learned about subjects other outside my international relations discipline, and it's it's a bit fun because uh, I could try to search the relevancy between these subjects and my discipline. And so this is an example of an article that I made. So what's interesting is that this article relies on a 50-year-old source. This is article about the dean of the dentistry faculty at the University of Indonesia, and it relies on a source from the university that originated in 1975. So as you can see here, the source already has not much abbreviations, and so I could translate it directly without concerns about whether the reader understands the terms being used or not. So for example, here there are terms such as sekolah menengah bagian atas, which is translated to high school, and the Fakultas Kedokteran Gigi here, which I translated to Faculty of Dentistry. So it is a direct translation because I do not have to interpret it much. So aside from this source, I also use a number of sources such as newspapers, such as brochures, because sometimes biographies like this are hard to find. And so my best chance is to go to the university's library and search by hand the sources for this, because even though the university is the flagship university of Indonesia, there are some problems regarding digitalizing the sources. Uh, so my next example is pretty much similar, but it is much shorter. If you take a look at the original article of this dean, it is much longer, and I think it is about 20,000 or probably 15,000 bytes. So unlike the previous article, this article is much shorter at around 7,000 bytes, or probably 3,000. And unlike the previous article, this article only relies on this one source, which is this book. And what makes it interesting is to be able to increase the rank of the article. I sometimes have to search for sources outside the university. So, for example, I have to go to the National Library to search for relevant information about this person and interpret it. And uh, what I find from working on this article is that the women scholars have made much progress similar to their male counterparts, and it makes me realize that the systematic discrimination that occurs even to this day on scholars probably outside my university needs to be ended. And one of the ways that I could contribute to ending this kind of discrimination is to increase the coverage of women scholars. Uh, this is my last slide. Thank you all for listening, and have a nice day.
Thank you so much, Jeromi, for such an insightful presentation. It's time for questions. I don't know if anyone has any question, but I really enjoyed the session learning about Indonesia, women, and the gender dynamics. It's very interesting. We would like to open the floor. If there are any questions, you can also leave them in the chat box. Does anyone have any question? Jemima, do you have any question? Jemima, we are not able to hear you. Okay.
Is it okay?
Yes, please.
Okay, so yeah, so I'm saying that was a very insightful presentation. I actually do not have a question. I just want to say thank you to Jeromi for that wonderful presentation.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's been a really wonderful session. I don't know if Jeromi wants to share some last thoughts with us, but I was really impressed to know that you've written 400 articles on English Wikipedia. That's really inspiring. What has been your motivation as a Wikimedian writing more articles? I think that inspiration is really much um I mean, we are kind of curious and interested so that we can get encouraged to keep doing what we have to do. So this goes to Jeremy.
I'm sorry. What? What's the question?
Yeah, I was asking, what inspires you? Like, I see that you have more than 400 articles on English Wikipedia. It's really inspiring to know how you do it. And I think that those lessons can also help inspire us, especially as we are interested in building the gender gap. You know, how did you do it? What inspires you to do the work that you're doing on Wikipedia, bridging knowledge gap? Yeah.
So actually, what inspires me is mostly due to influence of my discipline because in as I've mentioned before, my university is uh, has embraced gender equality, and furthermore, my faculty, my department is very uh, woman oriented. So, for example, the full professors in my department is almost all women. So there's only like only one uh, man becoming full professors, and this inspires me to like increase the coverage because I've all constantly learning the in my classes in my lectures that the problem with our current country is the fact that the structures of male patriarchy is dominating us. And by one of the ways that I feel that I could decrease or at least and the finally dissolve this patriarchy is by doing coverage of the woman that has shaped the landscape of the academia, of the military, of the politics. And I also get to learn how they do it despite the systematic barriers that they experience. And probably another factor is the culture of my family, because my late father has also done the same, but he also likes to write about a lot of woman articles. And when I was young, he often told me about this, what should I say, myths or fables or stories about woman heroes or such. And it kind of inspires me to keep doing this coverage, even though I'm a bit older now. Probably that's my inspiration.
That is really inspiring. Thank you for sharing your inspiration. We are really encouraged. And I think there was one more person who had wanted to ask a question. Feel free to unmute and ask your question. I think um anyone want to ask a question? There was a hand raised a couple of minutes, but I don't know. Okay, please go ahead. Pesata. Sorry, I may not be I'm not okay. Kindly unmute and ask your question.
Am I audible now? Hello?
Yes,
Am
you are
I
audible. Yes, you are.
Okay. Thank you for having me in this Q&A session.
Yes.
So, let me, yeah, let me introduce myself. My name is Afandi. I'm from Wikimedia Jakarta community, and I'm very excited with the Jeremy contribution. Can write more than 400 articles in Wikipedia English, which is the administrator is very strict. And he, I just want to ask him, how do you face the administrator? I mean, like, even I'm an as Indonesian, people who want to contribute more in Indonesia is very struggling. And how do you contribute in English, which is English is not your main language? And how do you get the approval from the administrator? Since uh, we as the non-English speaker want to contribute, like mostly got some rejection. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, so regarding administrators, so I think the best way is to ensure that your articles has up-to-date sources, because I also experienced my articles getting deleted one day because of the plagiarism issues I've mentioned. And so, as I said, using non-English source gives you a better chance of preventing this article from being deleted by the administrators. And secondly, if you face deletion from these administrators, you have to argue yourself. You have to convince these administrators that what you wrote is notable enough, is significant enough for it to be included in Wikipedia. And the argument may last, depends on the quote unquote understanding of the administrators, because I've experienced the quote unquote debates with these administrators that last for a year or even a year or more, because you have to convince that these articles are notable and they might involve more admin if you perceive them to be unfair, or if you perceive them to be one-sided on this issue. So the most recent issue that I had with an article is about uh, this is not a woman article, but it's about the a bureaucrat, a national bureaucrat in Indonesia, His name is, if I remember correctly, this Suhadi or something like that. And after I write it, 3 hours later, the admin deleted my article. And I figured out from the admin that uh, after a plagiarism check on my article, that my article is very similar to a source. And immediately I realized that the source is English. And I haven't done enough paraphrasing to make the source look, to make my article look different enough from my source. And so what I do is that I search for non-English sources and try to complement this article with these non-English sources so that the plagiarism was kind of down, get seeped through these non-English sources, and it actually worked, and my article was restored. So this is the kind of approach you have to deal when facing administrators in the English Wikipedia.
Okay,
Oh, we have an admin here. Thank you, Rosie. I'm also an admin at the Indonesian Wikipedia too, but I'm not really active in doing janitor's work.
okay, maybe next time I will try to create a new article in Wikipedia English because my experience when I was uploading some images in Wikimedia Commons, they still enforce to delete my own work because of lack of the evidence that this is my own work. That's it. That's why I just like I wanted to continue my effort, but yeah, just like yeah, demotivation. Okay, maybe next time I'll try. Thank you for the inspiration, Jeremy.
Thank you so much for that wonderful question. That was really insightful to know. I would like to know if we still have some few more minutes. If we would like to use that opportunity to ask some questions. I'll ask Jemima to share the link to the those who are interested to lead or train us, train the community. We have a Google form to where you can, apply to be hosted as a trainer. This is really important because we are facilitating cross learning, cross collaboration. So this is also a good opportunity if you'd like to collaborate with Jeromi. You could reach out to him and learn more from the work that he does. I'm not seeing any more questions. I'm not seeing any more questions. Okay, so Jeremy has shared his talk page. Please feel free to reach out to him if you need any form of collaboration or you want to learn more practical tips with him. Please feel free to reach out to him. I think he's done an amazing work. Even especially as someone who is not an English native speaker, like he speaks good English, although he's not a native English person. To have written all of those articles, I think is really impressive feat that has been achieved. So I really appreciate all the work you're doing, Jeromi. If you have some final thoughts to share, I'll give you the opportunity, and then I'll talk a little bit about the Wiki Women's User Group. And yeah, so the floor, I don't know, Jeremy, if you have some last words.
Okay, so probably this is a call for collaboration because I've been working on articles alone for like a half a decade. And if anyone wants to probably propose articles from their home country to work on, feel free to reach out to my thought page, and probably we can discuss about the searching for sources, searching for image, etc. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you too so much. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Rosie Stephenson. She's the co-founder for Wiki Women's User Group, the user group that is facilitating this workshop. And myself, I'm the coordinator for the Wiki Women's User Group, together with my colleague, Jemima, who is also on this call. And what we're currently doing is to facilitate cross-learning across continents. So if you're here and you'd love to be hosted on any of the sessions, please do reach out to us. Jemima, if you can share the link to the Google form in the chat so people can, or you know of someone that will be good fit to host or have some wonderful ideas to share around women's documentation on Wikipedia, please do share with them as well. So another exciting thing is the Wiki Women's User Group is 10 years this year, and it's been 10 wonderful years of striving to bridge the gender gap on Wikipedia. And one of the notable projects that Wiki Women User Group has been up to is through the Wiki Women in Red projects and several other collaborations on the continent. And last year we launched the Wiki Women's Capacity Building Workshop, where we facilitating all this cross-learning experience. If there are new ideas of activities that you think we could organize, you can also share your thoughts. Reach out to us on the Meta page, Wiki Women's User Group Talk page. You can share some of your ideas with us, and we'll be very happy to collaborate. I don't know if Jemima or Rosie want to add anything to what I've said, but the floor is open. For anyone for the next 5 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, Ruby. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, Jemima.
Okay, so yeah, thank you very much. I will share the Google form on all pages, Telegram page, Wiki Women Telegram page. So please kindly take note of that. I will share it by close of today. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you too. So without much ado, I don't know if Rosie wants to say something, but without much ado, I'd like to bring the curtains down to today's wonderful sessions. Please do look forward to the next session. And if you ever missed any of the previous session, please go to our YouTube channel. You'll see all the recordings. There are resources for the community. You can listen to all the previous sessions that have been hosted and get inspired. You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you all for joining.